particularly find him hilarious, and that's how I treat Tony. I just laugh at him, but he's been a good mentor to me. And without meeting him and introducing myself to him, I don't think I would be in the situation in Bonsai that I got to in the end. And I'm still not there, by the way. I mean, Bonsai is a journey. There's no destination in Bonsai. It's just a journey. But due to me meeting Tony Tickle and his gang, Terry Foster and Mike Sullivan, I knew then where I wanted to go, what I wanted to aim for. And I was sort of press ganged into becoming chairman of the Wirral Society because I didn't want to run the society. I didn't want to take over. The guy who ran it wanted to step down. He'd lost interest in bonsai for one reason or another. Sadly, he's no longer with us. But once I'd taken over, once I'd been asked, and I decided to commit myself into taking over Wirral Bonsai, I wanted to lift bonsai at club level. I kept getting told by various people, you want to get out the club game. It's not for you. You're more advanced than that. You need to move on. But I knew there was a niche for club bonsai in this country, but it needed putting in the right direction. And I wanted to make Wirral the best, and I wanted to put us out there. And so we were invited to a show in Lytham St Anne's by a guy who's again unfortunately no longer with us, Peter Moth. And we were one amongst about 10 clubs, I think, that day. And we set our display up, and everyone just stood and shook their heads and thought, well, there's only going to be one winner here, which is what I wanted to hear as a club, for our club, for the Wirral. I wanted to know that we were going in the right direction. And I said I'd run the club for a year, until we found our feet and we got back on our feet and we started moving forward. Well, 10 years later, I decided to step down, and I passed the baton on, or somebody reluctantly took the baton off me. And that was a guy called, he's the ugly one amongst us tonight, called Andy Hardman. And Andy has taken the Wirral on from strength to strength. And as you probably all know, we are probably one of the best known clubs in the country. I think, as I say, I mean, I was made up. I was proud to sort of push us in the early days, but Andy has certainly moved us on to another level, and a lot of praise goes to him. I basically, my bonsai collection consists mostly of collected indigenous trees. And when I say collected, I don't have a lot of trees that have been that you could call Yamadori as such. I have a couple, but I didn't have a great deal of success in the early days. Keeping the collected stuff alive. I was collecting with Tony Tickle, a few others, but at the time I was in the fire service, and with the collecting, some of the collecting sites I was going to, we didn't have permission, and I didn't want to get caught because I didn't want to lose my pension. So, but the main reason was that the fact that I didn't have a lot of success in keeping them alive. But I was fortunate enough to know another guy who's sadly no longer with us, a guy called Tony O'Toole, who was a landscape gardener. He's been a friend of mine for many, many years, Tony, since I was a teenager or a young man. And Tony he was into the Japanese culture, the martial arts, like myself, and he was into bonsai as well, although not to the degree that I was. Tony loved digging trees up, collecting them, sticking them in garden soil and just watching them grow. That was Tony's passion. So when he found out I was into bonsai, he used to just leave them for me. And most of my bonsai collection had been collected from just urban gardens. And when he started picking up these privets for me, I'd never thought of doing a privet as a bonsai. You never ever saw a privet ever. I think it was bonsai snobbery, if I'm being honest with you, the reason why you didn't see them. It was just basic bonsai snobbery. And I think the first people ever to exhibit a privet in a national show, and correct me if I'm wrong on this one, on an international show, was probably Graham Potter, and also possibly myself. I exhibited a tree at Willow Bog at the fair. Was it I think it was the first or the second Show-Hin and Chew-Hin exhibition held by Peter Snart up at Willow Bog. So myself and Graham Potter probably were the first people ever to work with privet as bonsai in this country. And Mike Sullivan once said to me when he saw me working on a privet, he said, "I don't know why you're bothering with that for." He said, "You may as well throw it in a bin because it'll never make a bonsai." And then some years later, he saw one of the big privets I've got at Bonsai Europa, and he was standing there and just staring at it for ages. And I said to him, "Remember when you told me to throw that privet in the bin?" And he just shook his head and walked away, like, you know. So there is a bonsai niche for privets. And because of the fact that Tony O'Toole was collecting an awful lot of privets for us lads on the Wirral at the time, and we were starting to see more and more of them, they became commonly known as the Scouse Olive. So because you've got these wonderful olives in the Mediterranean regions, particularly Spain and Italy, and they're just basically the olives that they're collecting over there. They're just weeds. That's all they are. They're just weeds, self-seeded weeds that have been growing in crevices on rocks for hundreds of years. Now, unfortunately, we haven't got that with privets, but what we have got, we've got an abundance of garden material, an absolute abundance of it out there, and with a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of craftsmanship, asking people's opinions. Where would they go with this? We can turn them into decent bonsai. All right, they may never be as good as some of the Mediterranean olives that we see because of they haven't got the diversity of movement or the natural deadwood. But to some extent, we can create that ourselves. You know, we've got the ability. We've got the artists capable of carving them, or we can carve them ourselves. We've got the artists capable of styling them, or we can style them ourselves. And you know what? Tony O'Toole, who collected all my privets for me, the first one he collected, he called it as I was out at the time, and I come in, and it was a privet lying against the bin, bare rooted, hardly any fine roots on it. And I rung him and said, "Tony," I said, "you've left a tree there." I said, "It's not going to live, mate. It's got no roots on it." He said, "Don't worry about that." He said, "You can kick them up and down the street." And he wasn't far wrong. He really wasn't far wrong. Although, don't get me wrong, I have lost privets. I've lost a couple, albeit very small ones during bad winters. But generally speaking, he was right in what he said. You can kick them up and down the street, and it doesn't matter what you do to them, they'll respond. They produce masses and masses and masses of fibrous root. If you keep them in good soil, good bonsai soil, you feed them well, you don't over prune them in the early days, and you'll have to repot them. I don't like to repot my trees on a regular basis. I like to leave my trees in the pots for as long as I can, because once you start taking them out the pots and repotting, some of them, a lot of trees sulk, and they take a couple of years to sort of come back and start putting growth out. But privets, they put that much root out, and once you start developing a really good root system on a real good bonsai root system, they produce just enormous amounts of root. So you can't really go wrong with them. Any questions up to now?
If you need to ask a question, just unmute yourself. please. Nothing so far.
No? No questions up to now? No? Okay. Right. Well, as I say, we've got an abundance of privets in this country. You see it in hedgerows. I know where there's one. I'm not kidding you. You couldn't dig it up because of where it's located. But people say, well, they don't get thick trunks on them. Well, that's because mainly they're constantly pruned, aren't they? Because they're usually grown as hedging material. But if they are allowed to grow unchecked, they will put a good girth on them. They will put a good sized trunk. I know where there's a privet, and it's not 10, 15 minutes from where I live. The trunk on it, I'm not kidding you, it's got to be at least 2 foot in diameter, the trunk, at least. It's monstrous, this thing. And I've often thought about trying to get permission and dig it up, but where it is, it's growing against the wall of a building, and it's probably wouldn't be feasible to do. But they will produce thick trunks if they're grown and they're grown unchecked, or they are extremely old hedgerows and they've been grown for a long, long time, because I don't know what time, when about in history the British started planting them as hedging trees. But I mean, you do see a lot round the Wirral area and around Birkenhead area, in old Victorian houses. Now, I wouldn't know how long they'd been there, whether they were planted in the 19th century or the 20th century. I don't know. But you do see a lot of old privets, and some of them have got good thick trunks on them as well. The way to go forward with a privet when you first get one, you first dig it up, is get it into some good soil, get it into some good compost, and in my experience, it doesn't really matter if you bare root them from the word go. I mean, a lot of Yamadori collectors insist on leaving some of the mountain soil on the roots when you're collecting trees. But with privets, I don't think it matters, and Andy Hardman might tell me different on this. I think you can probably bare root them quite easily and get them into some really, really good bonsai soil. Probably, I would start off from a newly collected tree. I would probably start off with 1 part akadama, 1 part pumice, and 1 part sifted leaf bark, and just allow the tree to grow. Just allow the tree to have its head, have its strength. Once it's established, throw what you like at it. Don't worry about this bonsai food or that bonsai food. Just throw what you like at it. I feed most of mine, or I do in the early days when they're wanting to grow and I'm wanting to grow. I feed them on chicken pelleted manure, which you get from Wilco's for about £5 a tub, and you throw that on them, and they just go berserk. I mean, you can get growth easily 3 foot long in one season, even longer, and just let them grow. And for the first couple of seasons, I'd say for the first 3 years, how I've styled my privet is each season I've just allowed them to grow, and I've basically clipped them back like a hedge. I've clipped them into a dome, so they look basically like a tree, if you like. I haven't clipped them as hard on the lower branches because, obviously, as we know, where most trees are concerned, most of the energy goes to the apex anyway. So we want to prune that harder than we would the lower branches. Now, all I do is I allow my privets to grow, grow berserk. Midsummer, bang, 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 clip them like a hedge. Feed them again. The end of summer, end of August, bang, 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 clip them like a hedge again. I do that for about, say, 3 years, depending on the vigour of the tree. And the two main privets we use, and they're very, very difficult to tell apart, by the way, is Ligustrum vulgaris and Ligustrum ovalifolia. Now, the vulgaris is a more hardy and a more vigorous tree, in my experience, to the ovalifolium, although they're very difficult to tell apart. There is another privet which you see quite a lot, called it's the variegated variety. It's like got like a gold, not variegated. It's got like a golden leaf on it. You've probably seen it. It's more of an ornamental privet. This I wouldn't say don't have a go at it, because do have a go at it by all means. But I find them less vigorous, less hardy, and also more susceptible to insects and disease when they're grown in a pot. So I'd be wary of those a little bit. I'd stick to the ovalifolium and I'd stick to the vulgaris. Only, having said that, good luck when you collect them if you can tell them apart. So yeah, for the first 3 years, just clip them like a hedge, and then after about 3 years, repot, and you'll be absolutely amazed with the amount of roots it's put out. If it's grown in a shallow pot, a bonsai pot, or a small box, or a small plastic bowl or whatever, after probably about 3 years, it will probably start to slow down a little bit because it's probably become root bound. And when you take it out the pot for the first time, you'll be amazed with what the roots that it's put out. It's incredible. And so it does take quite a bit of work when you're repotting. When you want to start to slow it down then, and you want to start developing it as a bonsai, you need to start pruning it more selectively. I tend to prune mine now, or autumn or now. But what I will do now is, or maybe within the next month, they produce, like oaks and a lot of other trees, ash, they produce a king bud, a privet. Now, it's not as prominent on a privet as it is on an oak or an ash, but it's there nonetheless. And when you look carefully, you'll see it. Now, if you're starting to ramify your tree, starting to produce a bonsai, what you need to do is you need to remove that king bud off certain branches. So you need to go over your tree with a fine tooth comb, probably between now and sort of March, before it breaks out, and start removing that king bud or pruning the tree back. Leaf pruning, you can leaf prune it if you want, but in my experience, once you start pruning a privet, when it starts growing in a pot, and you start pruning it, and it starts mutating, shall we say, into bonsai culture, there's no real need to leaf prune it, because the leaves tend to become smaller anyway. The only time I tend to leaf prune probably I would leaf prune probably in autumn to get rid of any excess leaves that the trees kept on the tree, because they can be a semi-evergreen. They can lose all the leaves, but they can be a semi-evergreen as well. Or now, I've left some leaves on one of the privets that I'll show you shortly, just to show you what it's like, sort of with a cup with a few bits and pieces of leaves on it. But it's better if you get rid of them, because you want to do any wiring or any work on them. They're obviously better wired without leaves on them. The wood on privet, once it starts to rot, it can be quite soft, and it can rot quite quickly. So you really need to keep on top of that. I mean, I like my trees to rot naturally as much as you can. I do carving. I do hand carving, and I'll carve with power tools. But I do like them to rot to a point, because they look it looks better when they've rotted themselves. They look more natural. But with privets, you've got to know at which point to try and stop that rot, because once it sets in, it can sort of really take over and start taking away the real heavy heartwood of the tree. So for that, for the bigger trees, I'll tend to use something like a Ronseal wet rot wood hardener once or twice a year. And for the smaller trees, I'll just use super glue or something like that, which works a treat. I think that's more or less the basics. If you jog me memory with anything else. When you're pruning, when you're wiring a privet, if you snap a branch, just put a bit of super glue on it or a bit of tape. Leave the wire on it. Put a bit of super glue on the crack, the snap, or a bit of self-amalgamating tape or raffia, anything like that, and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll heal over, and there won't be any ill effects whatsoever. But you know, if the branch does die for whatever reason, it'll pop another bud out, or you can thread graft quite easily. There's one of my trees here now which hasn't been shown for a couple of years because I'm in the process of thread grafting a branch onto it, and I'll show you that shortly. They can be grown in any style, anything formal upright, informal upright, split trunk, semi-cascade, cascade. You can grow them as a group. Root over rock, root in rock, you name it. Literati, you can grow them as. You can grow them in any style that you feel that you want to. Any style of that particular tree that you've collected lends itself to. Just grow it in that style, and you know they'll grow from cuttings. They're basically weeds. If you want to start early, you want to take a load of cuttings and get some nice movements into them while the whips are still young and flexible. You can throw a load of wire on them, bend them into all kinds of shapes. You can snap them. You know, they'll come back. So that's basically they're the basics, but really on privet. If there's anything else to think of while there's any questions to be asked or anything we can talk about as I'm moving along, if I think of anything else I haven't mentioned, well, I'll interject. What I would do, once you've got it into a bonsai pot and you're starting to develop it as a bonsai, and as it's coming away from its raw material stage, I would probably just use something like 1 part or 2 parts Akadama to 1 part pumice as the soil mix, and it'll grow quite happily in that. And if you want to slow the growth down a bit, I'd take a bit of the nitrogen away, give it a more balanced feed. But other than that, they don't need any specialist treatments at all. Tony?
How often do you feed them, Ian, and with what?
How often do I feed them and with what?
Yeah. When do you start feeding them?
When? I'd wait till the leaves have come out. I'd wait till the leaves have hardened off, and then I'd start feeding them. I don't have a feeding regime as such. I throw chicken manure at mine. I put chicken manure on them and let them to grow and get them healthy for the first sort of 2 or 3 years of their life. Yeah. And then once you want to slow the growth down, over the past few years, on all my trees, I've been using something I think it's by Miracle Grow. It's fruit and veg fertilizer. It smells a bit like gravy. It's very, very fine brown granules. And I've been using that on all my trees for a late season feed, and also any trees that I don't want to put out a lot of growth. I use that on them, but also I throw a bit of seaweed at my trees now and again. And privets as well. A good thing about privets is they're relatively pest and disease free. If you just keep an eye on the vine weevil, you know, give them a treatment twice a year for vine weevil. If you spray them, give them a winter wash a couple of times, autumn when the leaves have dropped, and again when just before they're ready to come into leaf. Generally speaking, they're fine.
I have a question.
Yeah.
First of all, this is amazing. Information overload.
Oh,
Where do we start? Where do we start? It's great. So this could be a stupid question. So privet stroke box stroke buxus, are they the same thing or are they different?
No, there's no such thing as a stupid question, only a stupid answer.
Thanks.
No, they're not. They're not the same thing. I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, and Andy Hardman, there's Mark Morland. Hello, Mark. I didn't see you there, mate. And Ming. Andy might be able to fill you in a bit better than me on whereas the genus is concerned. But I think buxus are Mediterranean originally, if I'm not mistaken. But they may be in the same upper echelons as privets or whatever it's called, but they're certainly not. They're not the same as privets. No.
Okay, it's just the last year. I mean, for the last like probably 8-9 years, I've had two like buxus balls in the garden. Started kind of getting into bonsai 2 years ago, and last year I've literally just hacked them back like a stump, and they're obviously growing back a little bit, but they're obviously a totally different thing to a privet. And I've seen privets like for sale, like the Yamadori. I'm not a massive fan because I don't have patience, like everyone knows in our Twickenham group. I like instant bonsai type shape.
Well, privet's the way to go then. Privet's the way to go. If you haven't got patience, believe me, privet's the way to go because they're so quick.
It sounds good, yeah. So when you get like, we're buying like a stump, and for me, a stump in a pot doesn't look much. You know, like you say, we literally just whack it in the soil, feed it, and just let it grow, trim, it grow, trim.
Let it grow. Let it grow berserk. Don't get into the habit of pruning, and this goes for all your trees as well. By the way, don't get into the habit of pruning too soon. You want to allow your trees energy. You want to allow them to grow because the more they grow, the more energy you've got. And when you prune them back, the more back bud and the more they'll throw out. Just a quick word on box. There's quite a few different species of box, and some of them can be some of them have to be pruned at different times. I know there's one particular species which doesn't take well to early season pruning. And also, you can get something called box blight, which is not very nice with buxus as well. Don't get me wrong, buxus make fantastic bonsai, but they take quite a long time because they're quite slow growing compared to privets, particularly in our climate.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problems.
I'll jump in with one. When you collect, so we dug up a, must have been like 25-year-old hedgerow probably a couple of months ago. I've got about 5 or 6 in the garden. Some of them are pretty thick trunked. When you do collect them, do you cut them back quite a lot to get kind of, and then let it grow, or do you just kind of leave them? So I've got one that's probably about 2.5 foot tall that I haven't taken anything off, and then the rest are probably about 1 foot or so, but they've basically just had the top hacked off to a load of sticks or bits and branches coming out at the moment and nothing done to them yet. But how harsh do you go on kind of your first
what I would do when I'm collecting, I would definitely cut them back reasonably hard. But what I would do, I'd have a quick look at the tree, look at the trunk, and have a quick look to see where you might find the new leader, where the new leader is going to be. If there's a possibility that the new leader might already be in place for you, because it's been pruned back and pruned back and pruned back. As you know, they can grow in you can have a great big stump like this, and then you can have multi-trunks coming off it, can't you? Off a privet.
Yep.
Sometimes they grow a particularly fat one where all the energy's gone. Now, you might want to use that as your new leader. Okay?
Yeah.
So before you really hack them back, have a look first to see if there's something there which you might think, well, that's going to be my new leader, that I'll keep that. Because if you don't do that, the only thing that might do is might set you back a couple of years because you're going to have to probably grow a new leader anyway. because unless you've got a big stump of a tree and you're going to grow it into a broom style tree, which that's probably the only sort of style I wouldn't grow into a privet into. But yeah, have a look first to see if there's a possibility that there might be a new leader there, because that could save you a couple of years' growth. That.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Ian.
Yeah.
I had a question. I've got a privet that's pretty old and got quite a thick trunk. It's been in its pot for quite a while. In fact, I haven't changed it since I bought it, and I'm not too sure when to exactly change it. Do privet like being sort of quite tight in the pot, or should I be changing it every 2 to 3 years, something like that?
How far down the line is it been developed as a bonsai?
Yeah, it's quite well developed. It's got sort of quite fine ramification on top, and the surface of the pot, it looks like I'm actually wanting to repot it at the moment because it's looking like it's sort of pushing out. Yeah,
well, if that's the case, repot it.
Yeah.
Repot it, give it some renewed energy. Okay. And then, as I say, once it's at the bonsai stage where you think to yourself, well, you know what, I wouldn't mind, this is almost ready for exhibiting this, or this is ready for exhibiting. That's when you want to slow the growth down then. Okay. And then you do keep it pot bound, but to a point. You can only keep trees. I keep most of my trees pot bound, but only to a point. You've got to know the tree, and you've got to know when to repot, because if you don't, a number of things can happen. Once the tree will slow down a hell of a lot, too much. And it won't be getting any energy because it's got nothing to feed off. There's no oxygen in the soil. It's just root, particularly with privet. I've actually repotted privet. I've took the privet out of the pot, and there's been no soil there. There's been that much root. It's pushed all the soil out. Yeah. And another thing, if you've got in a really nice pot, a really expensive Japanese or Chinese pot, or a good European pot, it could burst the pot. Mm. You know what I mean? They're that powerful and they're that strong. If you leave them in too long, they could burst out the pot, and the pot could crack and burst. So you've got to take that into consideration as well. But always err on the cautious side. If it hasn't been repotted for 2 or 3 years, and there won't be a problem repotting it. It just might slow it down a touch. But don't get into the habit of repotting it every year, every 2 years. You know what I mean? Let it grow. Let it get settled in that pot and established in that pot.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Anyone else? Tony? Anyone?
Ian, can I ask you a question, please?
Yeah, just let me find you. Who are you?
Bill Baker.
Oh, Bill Baker, is it?
Ian, I've got an oak collected tree. Do you ever get them to flower at all, or do you try and get them to flower?
I never try and get them to flower, but they will flower. Right. They will flower. They will flower quite easily, particularly when in the early part of the season, once they're established. My big one that I've got here now, that throws flowers out quite readily, and I'll let it flower. To be honest with you, it's not like again, they're not like a lot of trees where, I mean, they will use energy flowering, obviously, but certain trees, you've got to be careful, haven't you, with the amount of flowers a tree pushes out. But yeah, I mean, I allow it to flower to a point. And if it was flowering nicely all over the tree, it's a good energy all around the tree, and there was a particular exhibition coming up, and it was flowering. Yeah, I'd exhibit it in flower, because they do produce a nice flower privet, and it smells nice as well. There's a nice smell to it. Yeah. So yeah, I would. It would. It depends on the stage of development that it's in. Obviously, in the early stages, you don't want it to flower because it'll slow your developments up, you know. But in its latter stages, and when it's ready, when it's almost ready as a bonsai, shall we say, yeah, there's no harm in letting them flower.
Great. Thank you very much, Ian.
You're welcome.
Hi, Ian.
Who is it?
It's Andy.
All right, well, I've only got four screens, all right, Andy?
It's Andy.
I'll be here somewhere. I fully agree with you. I think one of the things with the flowering is that as the shoots tend to grow out and extend in sort of early spring, sort of May, June time, we tend to prune them back to a pair of leaves to try and get a second flush of growth that year. And the flowers develop at the shoot tips. So if you don't prune them in that early stage of the year and let the extension growth sort of grow out a bit more, you'll see more flowers on your tree anyway, but it'll become a little bit more unruly in the actual shape of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And
but as you said, they've got an incredible scent to the flowers. It's nice to actually let them flower and smell them now and again if that's not too perverse.
No. Well, they attract bees as well, don't they?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Carry on. You're doing quite good.
Oh, thanks.
Doing very good.
We get to grading at the end of it.
I taught him everything he knows, Which isn't a great.
Yeah, you did.
Which isn't a great deal, by the way.
And just to say to Chris Saxby, yeah, we can grade him privately on Messenger.
Ian. Bloody Liverpool supporters, they're all the same. They haven't got a clue.
Go on, Tony.
Ian.
Yeah.
Do they take easily from cuttings?
Yeah. Yeah, they take easily from cuttings. I've never ever done cuttings. Have you, Anne?
Thank you. Sorry?
Andy, is that Andy Hardman? Have you ever taken any from cuttings?
No, I've never bothered. I mean, I'd rather just find something more established. There's so much stuff around.
Yeah. I'm the same.
In all fairness, I've never tried air layering one, but I mean, I suspect they will air layer so easily. Like you said earlier on, can you bare root a privet when you collected it? I was going to comment, but there was other things going on, or someone else commented, so it felt rude to jump in later on. But they've got that much vigor in them and that much energy stored in the trunks and the branches. You can really, you can bare root them, and you can virtually take them down to no root at all and grow them again more as a mature cutting. I'm sure they would sort of, maybe in sort of April, May or something like that, when they want to push roots out, if you just cut a stump off like you can with a willow tree and dropped it in a bucket of water, I'd be interested to see what it would do, but I strongly suspect it would probably root.
Yeah, so, definitely.
I would think, if you don't want to lift a tree, maybe air layering is an answer to getting yourself a little bit of material. Because they'll take from cuttings easy enough. They grow everywhere. They'll air layer easy. I've never tried one, but I've never had to. But I'm absolutely sure they would air layer as easy as you like.
Yeah, definitely. Again, going back to the Scouse olive anomaly, or whatever the word is. Aldi collect a lot of the olive collectors in the Mediterranean. What they do is they actually they'll saw 100, 200-year-old tree off at the base. They saw it off at the base. So it's just a piece of a stump of a tree that has got no root on it whatsoever. They'll screw it to a piece of plywood, stick it in sand and put it in a greenhouse or whatever. And it'll throw roots out. An olive will throw roots out from a trunk this bigger. It's incredible, and I'm sure privets, I'm not saying they would, but they are so hardy and so vigorous and so, forgiving that, as Andy said, if you put them in a bucket of water and put them in, kept them in a humidity tent or something like that, I'm sure they would throw roots out quite readily. But as Andy says, collecting or air layering is the best way probably to go with them.
So would you advise not to go on a site like I've just gone on and find a privet and buy one all kind of ready bonsai-ish. I'm on all things bonsai at the moment.
No. If I went to a show, an exhibition, or someone was selling one online, and it was and I looked at it and I thought that's a great tree, that, and I had the money to buy it, I'd buy it. Absolutely, I would. Yeah, definitely. Because don't forget, if you buy a ready-made tree, it's gonna save you many, many years of time. You can go and collect trees right, left, and centre. But at the end of the day, it's still going to take you 5 to 10 years to get that tree where you want it to be before it can be called a bonsai. Privets, you're probably looking at 5 years because they're that vigorous and that quick. But a lot of other trees, you're looking at least 10 years before you could call it a bonsai. So yeah, I would say if I had the money, certainly I'd be going out and buying bonsai trees right, left, and centre. It doesn't matter what species they are.
This is £200. This one. I don't know if you can see that one. You can't really, can you?
Is that a privet?
Yeah, it's a privet.
Well, that's a good £200 spent, isn't it? How big are you looking at? How big are you looking at?
It's 53 centimetres tall, it says.
Put that in inches.
Okay. Sell you a couple for 200 quid, Gregor.
Gregor, we've got loads.
Oh, have you? Okay, I won't buy it now then. I'll wait till I'll give it an hour.
wait for the next group meeting. We dug up about 13. So between like me, Nick, and Tony, there's 13 privets that are big. I've got one of them is about 10 inches at the base.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I like a nice girth. That's good.
Anyway, next 10 inches at the base.
Oh yeah.
Chris Saxby's got a couple of big ones, haven't you, Chris?
Hey, never let it not be said that, mate. In fact, there you go. You see that?
Yeah, Chris, that's it.
Nice. Have you got a lot of carving on that?
It's all natural deadwood now. It's all naturally rotted.
Nice. I think two of the ones I've got a big kind of hollowing out of the front, which is rotten, but it's really soft. So I think I might have to get some of that hardener that was mentioned earlier.
Get the Ronseal hardener. In fact, these two are in honour of our good friend Tony O'Toole. I got him. These are from his batch, Ian.
Yeah. God rest his soul.
Yeah. Ian, do you want me to get the pictures up?
Here you go. Whilst Ian's working out how to get his pictures up, there's another one from.
Cool.
Can I have that for £200, please?
Well, Chris Saxby, you're joking, aren't you?
You can't even have the pot for 200 quid, mate.
Oh. I told you I'm new to this.
Hello, Ian.
Yeah.
Well,
I can show you the privets I've got here now if you want to. Sorry?
Ian, you were saying about the cuttings, yeah? And you weren't sure. I used to be a gardener, so I've got the big hedge stuff that you pull out and everything. And since I've retired, I haven't got access to that. And I started taking just cuttings, right? And just an example, I just brought a couple in. Just that is 2-3 years, and I've been making little marmays 2-3 years. Done about 50 of these.
Superb.
And they're just cuttings off of the big lumps that I've got. Just stick them in a pot, like you say, root, let them grow on, and they ramify. Little things. So easy.
Yeah. Well, there's your answer. Fantastic. I mean, that particular tree, that's ready to exhibit virtually, isn't it? What a beautiful little tree.
And it's only 2-3 years.
Yeah.
That's the wood hardener that I use. That's good stuff. Yeah, that's the stuff that you recommended, Ian.
Yeah, that's the stuff, Chris. But for smaller trees, I'd use super glue. If I could get a mass production of super glue going, I'd use super glue on all the trees. But you can only buy it in little tiny tubes, can't you? So it doesn't last long.
How do you, with the super glue, how do you find it absorbs into them? Because I got a juniper that had some super glue down at the base where it was dead wood, and they obviously didn't want it to rot, but it just kind of covered it, and you could see that there was super glue on it. It didn't soak into the wood.
Yeah, when it dries off, get a wire brush on it or something and just scrub it down quite, not too hard. But then keep adding the super glue. Keep adding the super glue, allowing it to dry, bit of wire brush, adding a bit more, wire brush, and then once the wood's hardened, just treat it as normal and just lime sulphur it.
See, what I found when using super glue, Ian, was that it protected the outside, but then the inside on privets just rotted.
Oh, but yeah, that can be the case, yeah. Yeah, that can be the case with privet, because if it's already started to rot from the inside out, yeah, you do need to use the wet rot wood hardener then, yeah.
And would you, if you've got some rotten wood in there, would you remove all of it before putting the hardener in, or do you put the hardener onto the rotten wood?
Well, I prefer to put it onto the rotten wood because depending on how rotted the wood was, the rotted wood can be a feature.
Yep.
It can be a feature of your tree. Because what we want to do is when we carve our trees, the best compliment anyone can give anybody when they exhibit a bonsai, particularly at a national or an international show, is if a fellow bonsai enthusiast doesn't know that your tree's been carved, if he thinks it's natural. Because when we carve our trees, we don't want people to know that we've carved them. We want them to be as if nature's caused that. So if you've got rot on your tree and you want to use that as a feature, just try and harden that rot off and leave it on as a feature.
Okay. So yeah, I've got one. You can see this. So you've got that in the middle, and that I can pick that away with my finger. So that's very, very soft. So I'd leave that and put some of that hardener on and leave it as is.
Yeah, but the problem you've got there is that the more you pick away at it, the more of it you're going to lose. So you're going to be left with no heartwood whatsoever. And then the tree itself probably, with privets anyway, it'll probably grow and grow and grow over a number of years, callus over, and you'll probably be left with no dead wood at all, just a hollow trunk. But yeah, if you want to keep it as a feature, by all means, put wood hardener on it. But you have to apply it. The best time to apply a wood hardener is September, because obviously the amount of rain we have, the trees are getting wet, aren't they, throughout the winter? But you can apply it twice a year. Okay. Tony, did you want me to show the group my privets now, or do you want to put some photographs up?
Yeah,
or?
no, if you give me 1 minute and I'll just sort that out.
Ian, can I ask you one more question, please? It's Bill Baker. Ian, when you exhibit your privet and you treat it with a wood hardener, would you use a darkened lime sulphur as a sort of an exhibition, at an exhibition to darken it a bit rather than just white lime sulphur?
Well, I wouldn't use white lime sulphur on a privet anyway. What I have used in the past, and Will Badley actually made a comment saying he wasn't that keen on it. But I didn't mind it. It looked a little bit artificial, if I'm being honest with you. I used a mixture of lime sulphur and black acrylic paint. Are you getting me, Bill?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Yeah. I used a mixture of lime sulphur and black acrylic paint. Okay. And it come out like a sort of a grey sort of colour. But what I used to like to use on deciduous trees, going back a few years now, but you can't get it anymore. Remember the old oil-based Arbrex?
Yeah.
Well, if you can get any of the old oil-based Arbrex anywhere in a can, if you mix some of that Arbrex with water and paint that on, that's quite good.
Right.
That comes up quite nicely. But as I say, the Arbrex that they sell now, it's more artificial. It's more plasticky. than the old oil-based stuff. I don't think you can get it anymore. But experiment. You know, try a couple of bits and pieces. Try some brown paint with lime sulphur.
I used soot quite successfully, didn't I? I got soot out of an old fireplace that had been sort of, like slightly up the flue, so it was all been like wooden coal burnt soot. And I dissolved as much as I could in water, and then used that and painted that on. And then you can sort of wash it with a soft sponge or a brush to lighten it or leave darker areas in the crevices and stuff. So that sort of works quite well as well. And that's kept its colour for probably about 4 or 5 years now since I used it. I've not retouched it, but it still keeps its colour very well.
It helps keep the fungus down, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah. It's good that way as well. There's a lot of sulphur in it.
Yeah.
I suppose it's a bit like lime sulphur anyway, so that way.
Yeah.
Sorry to stop you guys.
Gone brown, by the way.
Thank you, Ian.
My screen's gone brown.
Yeah, but can you see? Can some of you see the picture on the screen or not?
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it. Yeah, but it's
a
dodgy looking fella reclining against a tree.
I'm sorry, I had to put the picture of me up. It was the only one I could find with that particular tree, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's Bay City Rollers top.
Listen, okay. You were dancing around when the Bay City Rollers were actually in the charts, so I wouldn't go there with that one.
You still got sunburnt ankles.
Yeah, I apologise. Can you hear me still, by the way? Yeah, I apologise for having to put me in that picture because it's the only picture I could find of that particular tree. And why I wanted to show you that particular tree was that was the first privet I ever worked. That was the first privet I ever got off Tony O'Toole, and that was the first privet I ever worked on. And that was the privet that he said to me, you can kick them up and down the street. And it was the one that Mike Sullivan said, I don't know what you're bothering with that for. It'll never make a bonsai. But that particular privet now is actually growing in the ground at my missus' allotment because it was starting to sulk and slow down in a tree in a pot. It'd been in a pot for 10, 15 years on and off. So I actually planted it in the missus' allotment. So it's been recovering in there for a few years. But I'm going to dig it up this spring and put it back into a pot.
How does that work for everybody? Can you see that?
Yep. Question for you on the fine branches. Do you do something similar to that as you would with a maple, where you kind of take it down to split to 2 and then split to 2?
Yeah, exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same. And also, don't forget, as I was saying before, the dominant bud, the king bud they'll have a king bud, and if you look closely, you get it's much smaller on a privet than it is on an oak or an ash. But if you look behind the king bud, you'll see 2 more buds. And you can, at this time of year or up till next month, you can break that king bud off or cut it off with tweezers and allow the 2 buds behind it to grow, to ramify.
Okay. I think I've always tended to kind of let them all grow, and then once they've grown, I cut the middle out. And then
it depends on the development, the stage of development when to do that. If I was working on that particular tree that you're seeing now, I would be doing that now on that tree. I would be breaking the king bud off because it's fairly well ramified.
So if it was an early tree that had not been kind of worked on, so just kind of picked, would you let that king bud grow?
Let that grow, yeah.
Okay.
My screen's gone brown.
I don't know why we can see you. It's gone brown because it might be because of me.
I can see you, but it's gone brown, my screen, for some reason.
Bear with me 1 minute.
You haven't got an Everton game on, have you?
Hey, you didn't have the Liverpool game on last night, did you?
Get out of it.
These bloody Liverpool fans.
Keep it on topic, please, as you were asked.
This particular tree is quite a favourite of mine. That's how it looked. That's how it appeared at as you can see in the corner there. That's how it appeared at Bonsai Europa about, what date was on that then? 2015? 2015.
215.
Yeah. Right, well, if you can make out, see the first major branch on the left? Well, the depth of that branch, there's a branch coming off that, just at where the branch comes down to give that branch depth. Well, I cut that branch off because I wasn't happy with where it was situated. And I'm actually now thread grafting another one in a similar position, which I can show you in a minute. But you can see there how small the leaves are.
So what you've got there is the kind of the base of the trunk. Is that trunk or was that root that you've exposed?
No, that's trunk. That
is trunk.
That was trunk. Some of the trunk, some of it was actually naturally hollow. That's how it was collected, and some of it's been carved by myself. But that is all trunk. It's all hollow at the back, and all this the front of it there, where you can see the sort of heart shape of it. Yeah, that was carved by me.
Okay.
The pot it's in is a Gordon Duffet. I bought a trident maple off somebody because I didn't really want the trident maple, but I wanted that pot for that tree for me for this.
So Ian, how long did it take from start to show?
That tree, I would say about 10 years. And for that particular point, it took about 10 years. I've got other pictures of that tree in a bigger pot than that, and it's. I'll try and pass it on to. I'll try and get it to find it, and I'll email it to Tony, and he can show you that it's a later date, and the difference in the tree, in the development of the tree is actually incredible. The ramification in this particular picture to the picture that I will email to Tony. It's there for all to see. It's incredible.
Stunning tree.
I think that's...
How tall is that tree?
And that's, well, I'm looking at it now in front of me. It's about from the rim of the pot, I would say it's about 2 foot tall.
Okay, well, that's quite big.
Yeah. So the base of the trunk is probably getting on for 10 inches, 10, 12 inches maybe.
Nice.
That's amazing for 10 years.
Yeah, well, this is what you can do with a Privet. The other one that Tony showed you before, the smaller one, the Chewhin, that was about the same time from when that was exhibited at Willowbog. That was about 10 years from collection as well.
How old did you have estimated it when you collected it? So it took you 10 years to get there.
This particular tree, how old do they estimate? It's difficult to say because the size of the trunk on it and the way the trunk's rotted, it's got to be between 50 and 100 years old, I would say.
Okay.
Difficult to say, though.
Did you say you carved that yourself?
Some of it, yeah. The heart-shaped uro at the very front of the tree, and where it comes down, I carved that myself.
Any questions from anybody?
Amazing.
Amazing. Good question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What did you use to colour the carving?
Dremel, a Makita or a Dremel, or both.
Yeah.
I prefer to use a Dremel because they're easier to handle and you can get more delicate carving. But anything particularly big, if you've got a particularly big stump and you want to carve a particularly big uro or whatever out of that stump, well, you've got to get the meat of the wood out, and you're probably better off using a Makita die grinder. I haven't, and I still do use it. I use something called an Arbotech cutter, which is almost, you put it on a 4-inch angle grinder, and it's like a buzz saw. Yeah. For want of a better word, it's like a buzz saw. And it's just a round disc with teeth on it. And you use that on a 4-inch angle grinder, but you can use that as well to carve out big hollows and big sharis.
And what did you paint the carving with? This
was one I used a mixture of lime sulphur and black acrylic paint.
Right.
I wanted to create in the urrow, because that particular urrow at the front of the tree doesn't go right through the tree in places. I wanted to create the dark shadows in there as well. Yeah. So I tended to use a bit more black, a bit more acrylic paint. But what does help as well, when you do carve, what you can do, after I've carved my trees, I use a blowtorch on the deadwood to burn all the fuzz and the bits and pieces that are left. So that burns the wood, so that can look quite nice. You know, when it's burning, and if you rub that with a bit of a wire brush or a copper brush afterwards, quite lightly, but leave some of the black on, that looks quite nice as well.
Yeah, it takes the sharp edges off.
Yeah.
We've done a bit of that.
Yeah, we'll play with that. Nice. Any more questions on the tree?
Can I just say what you've got to be careful of when designing any tree, but particularly privets? I saw a privet at the same exhibition as one of mine, and although it was a bigger tree and a fatter tree, and Andy might like to comment on this, he doesn't have to if he doesn't want to, but the actual way that the privet had been made, that other particular privet, it had been made by basically hedge pruning. And what you've got to remember is you've got to hedge prune it to a point, as I said, for 2 to 3 years. But then you've got to structurally prune it. You've got to be able to prune your tree to get movement in the branches, to make the branches look natural. With this particular tree, I thought it didn't look natural. It looked like it was a big, thick, heavy trunk with a lot of foliage, and the branches were all thin whips because it had been pruned like a hedge.
Yeah, I will agree with you, Ian. And it had been pruned like a hedge probably only for a period of 3 or 4 years. And when you actually looked at the branches, there was no sort of definition or ramification or taper or anything in them. But I mean, the owner relied on the outline shape of the foliage to create the image and got away with it. But it's probably a little bit more like topiary than bonsai. There you go.
Yeah, we've got to remember that there's rules to bonsai, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to make a tree, a relatively young tree. It doesn't matter how young or old it is. We're trying to make it look older than it really is, and by doing that, we've got to have the lower branches have got to be thicker than the upper branches. The branches have got to get thinner and thinner as they go up towards the apex of the tree. But what else we've got to do is we've got to create movements in those branches, natural movements, so that the tree looks like it's been grown naturally. It hasn't been enhanced by man in any way, shape, or form. And the only way to do that is by constantly working the tree, by wiring, by pruning, by wiring, by pruning. If we rely on wiring alone, particularly on deciduous trees, not so much on conifers, because conifers are shaped and styled in a different way than deciduous trees. But if we rely on wiring alone in deciduous or hedge pruning alone with deciduous trees, we won't end up with an old looking tree. We might end up with an old looking trunk, but when you look into the tree and you look at the branches and how the branches are made, the branches won't look old. The tree will be contradicting itself. The branches have got to look old just as much as the trunk's got to look old. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
That tree there that you just showed us, was there much wiring done on that?
Yeah, quite a bit over the years. There was quite a bit of wiring. In fact, I still do a bit of wiring on it now and again. I still look at it. In fact, there's a guy wire on it there now, pulling the the main branch down. There might be a couple of other bits. No, I don't think there's any wire on that one in particular. But every now and again, particularly if I'm going to exhibit it, I will throw a bit of wire on it and bend the branch into a particular position. But then, you know, I'll prune it back. And you want this angular movement with deciduous trees. You don't want movements. You don't want this flowing movement with deciduous trees. You want this angular sort of natural looking movement that we see in the wild with old oak trees and old beech and old ash trees, old elm trees, although there's not a great deal of old elm trees left in this country now. But this is when you see the fantastic Japanese maples at the show, at the Cockfoot 10 and those type of shows, and now in Europe, in the big shows in Europe and Britain as well. They've got beautiful angular movements in the branches and great taper to the branches. The taper doesn't only extend to the trunk, it extends to the branches, and all the branches have got beautiful natural looking movements in them, and that's what we're trying to create when we're trying to create any deciduous bonsai.
Let me have a look at some of your trees.
Certainly, yeah. I've got 3 trees here, so just bear with me a sec. Can you see that one?
Yep.
Sorry. Can you see that little semi-cascade one? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In the crescent pot.
Yeah, yeah. Is that okay for everyone? Can you see that okay?
Yep.
There's quite a bit of carving been done on that tree.
Go slightly to the left. That's better, yeah. And how old is that?
How long have I had that?
Yeah.
Probably about, I'd say, 10 years. I struggled with that tree early on, and what type of style, what type of position I wanted to plant the tree in, and it baffled me for a few years before I decided that was the way I was going to go with it.
Yeah.
That tree there is in the pot that the first photograph Tony showed you. That was the pot that original tree was in, but this is a different tree. Again, this one's been quite slow, strangely enough, this particular tree. It's just starting to probably about another 2 or 3 years when I'll probably exhibit this tree. But it's always been a very slow tree. Maybe it's the ovalifolia variety rather than the vulgaris. Is that okay for everyone? Can everyone see that?
Yeah, I see the base.
I don't know if everybody knows, but if you pin Ian, it'll make it full screen on your screen.
If I pin Ian?
No. If whoever's watching pins you, they can see your full screen.
I was a fire.
Not you, Ian.
I kicked doors down for a living. I didn't do computers.
Yeah, mate. I realised that.
No, I don't know how to do that, mate. Sorry.
No, you don't. You don't do it, mate. The other people, if they want to see you full screen.
Oh, okay.
You just go to the top right of your icon and do pin, and it makes it full screen.
We'll speak of you. Doors down. When you gave him a book, you only looked at the pictures.
Like that.
What did you say?
So apart from kicking doors down, when we gave you the book, you only looked at the pictures.
What, the Fireman Sam book?
We never could read.
Can you see that, yeah?
Do you move your finger away?
Does everyone see that okay?
Your finger's in the way.
Your finger? How's that?
We're working with amateurs here. It's outrageous.
Well, you're dead right there. You're dead right.
There you go.
How's that?
Yeah. Who's the dodgy fella on the wall?
Pardon?
Who's the dodgy fella on the wall?
Ah, there. That's my brother. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Right, that's the big one. Can you see that okay?
Just about.
Just take your time, Ian, and we'll mute ourselves so we don't get the speaker view. So you have to speak while you're doing it, Ian.
Okay, can you see the big one there? Can you see the big one? This is the big privet that you've just been looking at on the pictures. There's the natural hollow that was already in the tree. That's the Oro that I carved, and all the wood at the front that I carved out, trying to be sympathetic to the natural wood. Coming round to the back of the tree now, that's the thread graft that I've done. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you see the thread graft?
Yes.
That's just starting to take now. Yeah.
And how long does that taken to take?
About 2 years. This is about the second year, so I'll probably give it to the end of this season, and I'll cut the parent branch off, which is this one here.
Yeah.
Because it's got no depth. The branch has got no depth here. It did have, because you see the scar there, that big black scar. That was where the initial branch come, but it come up here and then come to the back. Now it gave good depth, but I wasn't particularly happy where it was located, where it came out of this branch. I wanted it to come out lower.
Oh, right, yeah.
I actually only just realised how big that tree is, seeing your hand up against it.
Yeah, it's quite a decent sized tree, isn't it? That's a branch that snapped, that I wrapped with self-amalgamating tape, just till it heals over. That'll be fine. The little bud there popping out. This tree, I've never known a tree. I mean, this is probably one of the oldest privets I've got, but it absolutely grows like a weed, and it pops buds everywhere you want them, except where I've got the sacrifice branch, where I actually wanted the bud to pop from. It'll pop buds all over the trunk. This trunk at the back here, there's buds there now. I have to go round about God knows how many times a week rubbing buds off. It just pops buds out of this old wood constantly. And that's obviously what's probably helped to produce this lovely old sort of gnarly bark here, because it's popping buds out here, there and everywhere. And I just rub them off all the time.
Is that how burrs are created?
I'm not sure, Andy might be able to give you some insight on that one.
Yeah, that's exactly how burrs are created. You get areas of trees that they're sometimes called witches' brews, and you'll get like a mass, you can get up to 100, 200, 300 shoots that will all grow out of one certain area. And eventually they all sort of die off because there's that many shoots within a limited area, all competing for food and water and light. Over a period of maybe 15, 20, 30 years, they all die off, and you end up with that proper burr sort of knotwood that we all crave for our jitters and stuff.
Thanks.
Any more questions about privet or anything else, particularly this indigenous stuff, while you've got the chance? I mean, if I can't answer the questions, Andy might be able to. Andy's got far, far better horticultural knowledge than I have. I prefer the art in bonsai. I prefer the styling and the shaping of trees and the exhibiting of trees. I enjoy exhibiting and talking to fellow enthusiasts about my tree and their tree and other trees in the show. But Andy is far, far better horticulturist than I'll ever be. So if I can't answer any questions on horticulture, I'm sure Andy will be able to while you've got the chance. I'm sure he wouldn't mind.
Andy's doing a talk for us in a couple of weeks.
Right, okay.
On that subject
I might gate crash that then as well.
Yeah, well, you are invited, so I can get my own back for all the comments you made earlier on.
Liverpool might have won a game by then as well.
Nah, don't be silly.
Can you see that, Privet?
Sorry?
Can you see that, Privet?
Let me, yes.
I've had that about 3 years, I think.
Wow. Right. Was it from collection or did you buy it?
I bought it for about a tenner, I think.
Well, that's a tenner's worth well spent, isn't it?
Yeah. It's about a foot tall.
Right.
Yeah. And Will Badbury did some carving on it with me.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Well worth a tenner.
Hi, Ian.
Yeah.
I've got two privets, the larger one that drops all its leaves, and then I've got a younger one that seems to keep its leaves throughout winter. Do you have to worry at all about any of these frosts, particularly on the one that keeps its leaves? Would it sort of damage the leaves at all? Or?
I mean, if I were you, if it damages the leaves, I'd just cut them off anyway.
Yeah.
If the leaves get damaged on them, just cut them off, because it'll grow new ones.
So do you protect from frost at all? Or?
Well, I personally, from a personal point of view, I wouldn't. I like my trees getting a bit of frost. But it will damage leaves. It will damage leaves on deciduous trees, the frost. There's no doubt about that. The only time I protect my trees, I protect some of the shohin and the marmay stuff I've got from frost. But really, the only time I will protect any of the larger trees from frost is if we get a really, really hard, prolonged frost. Like we had, I think it was 2010, 2011, we had 2 years where we were getting -15 and it was lasting for about 2 weeks. Now, I lost a couple of trees that year, and I know a lot of other people did as well. I know Ian Stewartson lost a couple of really, really expensive trees, and I think everyone I spoke to had lost trees. But other than that, I don't really protect my trees from frost or anything. I think the main worry in this country is the blooming rain.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you haven't got your trees in a really, really open soil mix, you're asking for trouble, aren't you, in our climates?
So if we're going on that subject, if we're saying that Privet's heartwood is very susceptible to rot and would rot quickly, is it the same for the roots? And like you said, with our wet climate and damp climate, do you have to worry about root rot?
I don't. I mean, I've never, not with the Privets anyway, I've never had to worry about root rot, particularly because they put out that much roots, they'll recover from any root rot they get. They'll just throw new roots out anyway. But the fact that I do use a really open soil mix as well, which I think helps. And I think if you have, unless you've got a polytunnel where you can put all your trees in your polytunnel over winter and control your watering yourself, I don't really think we've got much of a choice in this country. We've really got to use an open soil mix, otherwise we're asking for trouble. And in the summer as well. You know, we can get a lot of rain in the summer, can't we?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Me again. Hello. So Brendan's just sent me a picture of one of these. Hope you don't mind me showing this, Brendan.
Nah, go for it.
But this stump thing of a privet that he sent me is huge. But where would you start with that? I mean, we could talk about it all night probably, but like, that's huge. Would you like cut that right down like a foot tall, the whole lot?
To be honest with you, it's very difficult to say from a photograph. I always say this to people. People show me, I see that many photographs of trees. Where would you go with that? What would you do with that? And I say, without seeing the tree in person, I can't really say. It's very difficult. I mean, there might be something around the back that I could turn the tree round all the way around 180 degrees and look at it and say, well, I'd go with this. I'd go with this side as your front. You could use that as your leader, as your trunk. Or, you know, you could probably cascade it, semi-cascade it, go with it as a clump style tree. But without actually seeing the tree in person, it's very, very difficult to say.
I guess in some ways they almost give you too many options because there's so many trunks coming off of them.
They can do, yeah. Yes, absolutely, they can do that. But the more options you've got, the better, really. You know what I mean? Because you can make a lot of mistakes. But yeah, you've got plenty of options there. But try and get as much, show as many people. Take it when the club gets back up and running again. When you start getting people coming to the club to talk to you, take it to the club and get as much advice off different people as you can, and then make your decisions.
Okay. You might be able to split it. You might be able to split it as well and get 2 or 3 different trees from it.
Yeah.
Brendan, it's your tree. Talk.
Yeah, it's just, I say, a big blob that I collected and just leaving it to recover. But there's 2 or 3 like that. But I tried to cut off all the horrible straight bits and just leave the older stuff. But splitting it might be an idea. So we could save that one for a club night tree and just go at it as a group and see what we can get from it.
Yeah, one of the ones that
you've got to be careful with that. I'll have an axe to it, and Tony will have his torch.
It's all good.
Brendan, one of the ones that we collected, you and I and Nick, I've split that and turned it into 2.
Oh, nice. Have to show us.
Yeah, I'll do some pictures.
Okay, any more questions for Ian? No. As far as I'm concerned, just really informative on Privet and the journey that Ian has gone through working with Privet and having that conviction to work with Privet. But also, I think one of the other things, because we're quite a young club, you know, not even 18 months old, that, you know, Ian's enthusiasm to bring Wirral Bonsai on and to take it through to have show trees, etc., etc., is a good thing for any club to have that sort of standard to push to develop trees at show level as well as every single thing in between. And I think that was a great inspiration from my point of view with this Twickenham Bonsai Club. So Ian, I can't thank you enough for giving your time to share with us this. And it's not just us actually, because there's Surrey Bonsai Club here. There's a couple of other bonsai clubs that are in as well. So, you know, what I quite like is the fact that, you know, we've got different clubs from over the country that are coming together, you know, and that's one of the good things out of COVID, you know, to bring us together. So, which is sort of quite nice. I don't know if anybody else has got any sort of views on it. I think Mark Morland's here again, and him and his wife Min are just doing a phenomenal job. State Bonsai Association bringing bonsai people together with their virtual shows and everything that they're doing is just astonishing for the bonsai world. So, you know, the more of this type of thing that we have, and people like you, have we got to take the mickey out of Andy in a couple of weeks? Yeah, is that
absolutely, right? Absolutely. Yeah. It's got to be done, hasn't it?
Yes. Absolutely. Are there any questions from anybody at all?
Just to say thank you very much for a wonderful evening. Well done, Ian. You did really well.
Yeah, thanks. See you soon, hopefully.
And you.
Any questions for us, Ian?
No, just you know, you're a young club. You just started out. I know exactly what it's like when I first took over our club. You know, we had nothing in the bank, absolutely not a penny. And we got people done us favours. I cajoled people into doing talks for us for nothing, just for expenses. I got good members. I got a good team, people around me, people like Andy and a few other people at the time. Get a good enthusiastic team behind you. You might have a club of about 50, 60, 70, 100 people, but you will only have a nucleus of about 6 or 7 people who've got that real intensity and that real enthusiasm to push on and to drive on in bonsai. And that's exactly what we were like at the Whittle. It was the same old people that turned up to the shows year after year, the workshops, you know, and Andy will tell you exactly the same thing as I'm telling you. Just keep at it. Don't give up. Get good. Make sure you get good speakers in. You know, they're worth their weight in gold. People who know what they're talking about. I mean, I'm still making mistakes now, but I really was reading books and I had nothing really, no one like-minded alongside me to help me to push on. But when you get those people with you and you get them people on board and you get good speakers at your club and you meet people, get out to the shows, the national shows. Mark puts some great shows on. You know, that's where you'll learn. That's where you'll learn. You'll get good material. Get good material as well. Try to avoid buying rubbish, you know. Try to either buy or collect decent material. If you see 4 trees that you like for 100 quid, or you see one for 500 quid and you've got 500 quid, buy the 1 tree for 500 quid rather than the 4. You know, try and work on decent material, whether it's collected or whether it's bought,
right,
or whether people give you it.
Yeah, great advice. So we're gonna sign off now. So if you wouldn't mind giving Ian a really nice round of applause, we appreciate that.
Thanks very much.
Good stuff. Thank you again, Ian. The Scouse Olive is the new one on me. That's a great one. My Privet will never be the same.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, all. Thank you for coming.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Keep in touch for one in a couple of weeks, everybody. Chase us instead of us chasing you.
Cheers, Tony. Thanks very much for that.
Cheers, Anne.
Bye now.
See you, Chris.
Thank you.